So today is Tuesday, Yud Daled Be'elu, Tovshin Ayin Aleph. This is a Shir in Sefer Tanya from the Alter Rebbe, Perek Aleph, and we're holding on Omud Eser in this print of the Tanya, down by the two dots following the Raya from the Posik. Ukamosh Kosu, Tzadik, Yisoid, Olam. However, Biur Ha'inyan, the explanation of this whole Inyan, of the miles and madrigas of Tzadik and Beinani that we just aroused in the previous section, says the Alter Rebbe. The explanation of this matter, which really will take up the whole, a large part of the Sefer Tanya, he said the explanation of that we begin with Al-Pi Mashukosu Harachav Zal. Now Harachav is the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital, but he was the great Talmud of the Arizal, and he is the author of what we call the writings of the Arizal. It's well known the Arizal did not write anything. Matter of fact, it's a big historical contest to try and find any Ksav Yad from the Arizal himself personally. They have one letter that the Arizal wrote his Mochutam, the one he became the Beis Yosef, the author of the Shulchan Aruch and the great Rav or Twas in his time. The Arizal wrote a Shaila to the Beis Yosef, and that exists in his Ksav Yad. And maybe a couple other very brief little documents or writings that we have from the Arizal, but almost nothing, particularly in the whole field of the Teres Kabbalah that he taught. But we don't have anything in writing from him. And you know the reason why. You guys are familiar with. The Arizal once said that whenever he brings up a certain inyan and he starts dealing with it, the flow in his moich is so immense that he can't possibly be mitzantzim in writing. In order to write it, he would have to be, and what occurs to him is a tremendous flow of new ideas occurs to him in such a way that it's almost impossible for him to speak. How much more so impossible for him to write? Because write is like a tzimtzum, bring it down into a traction and ordering it in ordered lines and ideas. He's simply unable, absolutely unable physically and spiritually to do so. That's why he never wrote anything every time. That's the simple reason. We actually have that, that's actually reported to us by the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital. So the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital, he was the one who wrote all the so-called Kisvei Arizal. The works of the Arizal were written by him, and they came down to all posterity through him. And actually, the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital, at the beginning of the writings of the Arizal, he didn't want to make them public. Was the whole thing that he understood from the Arizal that they should be hidden at the beginning. And there was a whole thing that he hid most of the great writings that he'd written down. He hid them in a certain place near where he was buried, I think in Damascus, outside of Eretz Yisrael. And it was only due to the energetic efforts of certain people that believed that it was the time to give forth all these great, and they differed with the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital about that they found a lot of the great writings that he'd written. Whether they found all is another question, because there are other great people who also wrote things that they'd heard from the Arizal, and it's also a question as to whether they did rightly in doing so, because according to some places it would appear that the Arizal wanted that only what he told the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital that should be written, and only that should be, if anything was to be made public, only that should be made public. And there was a question, but there were other very great and authoritative men that they did make public certain terms of the Arizal. Anyway, it's a whole tremendous story. The whole background of the Kisvei Arizal it's a whole amazing historical chapter all in its own right. It's a long and difficult story, and it's full of slight contradictions and other things that occur here and there, and it's only with a tremendous siyata d'shmaya that we've been zeicher that all these great writings of the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital did actually reach us the way they did. So therefore he said, Al pi ma shekosav halacha b'zal Rabbeinu Chaim Vital b'sha'ar ha'kedusha. Now, Sha'ar ha'kedusha means the chapter or the great way of holiness, Sha'ar ha'kedusha. Now, certain of the works of the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital are called Sha'arim. We have eight such smaller works, apart from the Eitz Chaim and the pre-Eitz Chaim. We have Shmoina Sha'arim from the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital. But to the best of my knowledge, we don't have such a Sha'ar called Sha'ar HaKedusha as such. There's no such book called Sha'ar HaKedusha. And that's a very, very interesting thing. It could be that in one of the chapters, which I haven't just had the opportunity this afternoon to check properly, in one of the individual chapters of one of the gateways, it could be that there might occur a Sha'ar called Sha'ar HaKedusha, but there's no book, as far as I know, called Sha'ar HaKedusha. Now this occurs in Tanya in one or two places where the Alter brings names of books from the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital, which are not actually, we don't have them, and they are actually chapters of books, and they're referred to like as the name of the book. And in other words, there's something that the Alter wants to bring out very specially with the names by which he refers to certain parts of book or to books in general. And therefore he calls this sefer the Sha'ar HaKedusha. Now exactly what that is, where it is a little bit hard to know. But the gateway to Kedusha that was written by the Rabbeinu Chaim Vital, wherever that may be, and in whatever sefer it may be, in whatever detail it may be, it has to be called the Sha'ar HaKedusha. That's its real name. It's the gateway of Kedusha, as we'll soon see in a second. This leads us to a very basic knowledge of the spiritual aveda of a man. So he says, B'Sha'ar HaKedusha u'be'Eitz Chaim. Now this is a much more detailed reference to part of the Eitz Chaim. Now the Eitz Chaim was the great general work written by the Rabbeinu Chaim, a big thick sefer called the Eitz Chaim, and that deals with the whole seder of Ishtalshalos, right from the very beginning, right from the Tzimtzum Harishon, all the way down through all the different levels, and even later the clippers. I feel like the Oilams are clippers and so on and so on. The whole thing. The Eitz Chaim deals with all the elements of the whole Seder HaIshtalshalos. So he said in the Sefer Eitz Chaim, Sha'ar Nun, chapter 50, Perik Beis, because in the Eitz Chaim there's these gateways, chapters, and the chapters are themselves divided into chapters. In other words, a Sha'ar is a general section, and the Perik is like an individual section underneath the Sha'ar, or within the Sha'ar. Sha'ar Nun, the 50th Sha'ar Perik Beis of the 50th gate. Well, that's quite a lead up. What is written there? To l'chol ish Yisrael, to every mensch that he is part of the Jewish people. To l'chol ish Yisrael, echod tzaddik ve'echod rosha. Whether he be a tzaddik or whether he be a rosha, it doesn't matter which end of the rainbow we come to this man. In other words, those are two extremities. I mean, he can be the most extremely, like we saw, achieved person, the tzaddik. He can have no yetzer hara, he can be even higher than that, the most tremendous levels. And the lowest and most unrequired of all the Jewish people are Rasha, Rahman, it's like somebody who's mamish, a Rasha and hasn't yet corrected that, he's still callable and terminable as a Rasha. Yesh shtei neshamis. Each person has two neshama. Dixiv, or and sometimes it is written kidixiv with a kofar demon as well. Kidixiv, as is written, v'nishomes ani asisi, and I have made the neshomas, or I have created the neshomas. This is a quote from Yeshaya or Novi, Perek Nun Zayin, Perek, the 17th verse in the 57th chapter over there. And over there it's written a very interesting thing. It's written that first of all, Yeshaya Novi complains about some of the not good things that did not been doing. They've been wandering a little bit from the Eibishter and not keeping entirely to him as it should have been. And then he said, however, I am a very famous pasuk in Yeshaya Novi, which is, I dwell on the heights, and I am able to form a connection with a lowly person, somebody who holds himself very low and is very cast down. That's where I dwell. I go for those people, and those people who hold themselves big and they do things against my instructions and my will and so on, then I quarrel with them. I'm like in contrast or contra with them. However, he said, even with them, I'm not going to do it forever. I'll eventually bring them to a point where they'll come back to me. I'll eventually, cause them to rethink their situation or do tshuva, as we might call it, and they'll all come back to me. And he said, why? Because I have made, literally, a spirit has gone from in front of me, and it's got to, according to Rashi, the pshat is that since it belongs to me, the spirit, it's got to eventually be, bottled to me, to use the expression. It's got to become subservient and given over to me. That's what's got to happen eventually. Yeah, Fawuz, why? Neshomas ani yosisi, because I'm the one who made all the neshomas. I made it. In other words, I made the neshama. Since I made it, then it's going to have to eventually recognize my rule over it. It's going to come back, and therefore we're never going to forever quarrel. We'll always make up. Me with a yid, we'll always make up, and that's basically the whole implication of that thing. So what it means, the pasuk neshomas ani yosisi, the Eretz is saying that anything to do with a Yiddish neshama and its eventual necessity to find me and to be completely subservient to me, that's because I made it. And since I made it, then it's got to have to do with me. So in a way, that pasuk is talking about all the neshamas. We're talking about neshamas in a general way. The Eibishter made all the Jewish people, and therefore they've got to, eventually, according to Rashi's Pirush, they've got to find their way back to me. Because literally the spirit that's gone forth of me, it's going to have to come back to me. That's the implication of the pasuk. And it says neshamas ani, because I made all the neshamas. Comes along the Alter Rebbe, and the Rebbe learns from this something very, very specific. It's a very general verse, then, according to what I explained. Says the Alter Rebbe, no, neshamas ani asisi is talking, as it were, like the minimal of a plural is two. According to Jewish grammar, wherever you want to assume a minimal plural, then you must start with two. Otherwise you're not plural. In other words, unless we're told otherwise, a plural verb or a plural word in Lashon Kodesh means two. If there's some indication in the verse that it means more, then it means more. So the verse apparently seems to be talking that the Eibishter in general made all the neshamas of the Jewish people are his. So the Alter Rebbe learns now, neshamas ani asisi means that, as it were, every yid has got in him two neshamas. Now you notice how the Alter Rebbe has changed he's changing the nuance of this verse, and this is another very fascinating thing that we find in Tanya, that the Alter Rebbe in many places is mafarish verses in a slightly different way than what the simple, sometimes quite different, or just slightly different, but quite different than what a simple implication of the translation of the pasuk or its meaning implies. And yet, nonetheless, the Alter Rebbe learns kilo, and so therefore we suggest that the Alter Rebbe wrote ki diksiv, as it is written, or diksiv, because ksiv is an Aramic term, it's not kasur. So it's a way of saying that's written, but maybe it's not written. It's written, but it's not written 1,000% that way. In other words, that there's certain great pirushim in certain psukim that the leaders, the great leaders of the Hasidic teaching, Talmidim of the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov, that they had like traditional ways of understanding certain verses, and that's more like a way, that a thing that's given over to them, that's the pirush apnimi in that pasuk. So even though the pasuk seems to be talking a general way about Yidden, just that they have neshamas, no, neshamas on the Asisi, every individual Yid has got at least 2 neshamas. At least 2 neshamas, and then immediately says the Alter Rebbe, what are these 2 neshamas? What are they? Shehein shtei nefashot, that they are 2 nefashot. 2 nefashot. So, I mean, the pasuk says neshamas, and all of a sudden the Alter Rebbe says shehein nefashot, that they're nefashot. They're not necessarily neshamas, they're nefashot. And then he goes nefashot. And then he goes on to say nefesh echad mitzad haklipa v'sitra achra, and we'll go on a little bit further. What's the second one, etc. That's all in chapter base. We're going to find out about that. So here we see then a very interesting development where a pasuk seems to be talking in general. No, it's talking about each individual, and it's talking in the plural that you have 2 neshamis, which are 2 nefashos. And then the first one, kach v'kach v'kach v'kach, and we're going to be busy with the first one for quite a while now, and then eventually we get to the second one. So, here we meet a very basic approach, and a very, very basic inyan in the whole of Hasidic teaching, and for that matter, to a certain extent, in the whole of Yiddishkeit teaching, but with a special emphasis in Chassidus. And that is, that what is the basic makeup of a mensch? Particularly a Yid, that he's the center of mensch. You know, the Yidden are the chosen people. They're the Am HaNivcha, the Atav Chatanu. They're like the ideal state of mankind. So there are different ways over the generation, over the history of mankind in general, that has been suggested. How is a mensch made up? Some people say that a mensch is just he's just a goof with a body with a few other things running around in him, and they sort of boss him around, and that's more or less what a mensch is. Others say, oh no, there's a soul of you've got one soul. That's it. You have a soul, and in that soul, you yourself have different nuances. You have a thing which pulls you more to the to the evil side, and maybe a good sort of inclination or leaning. But you're lucky that you have one soul. You have one basic makeup. Some want to say that we have a soul. A soul implies a spiritual and high thing. You have just a sort of a creation of different organs that they make a sort of a spiritual type of vibe in you, and that just pulls you all over the place. Mostly it pulls you into things of selfish, even to the point where you had this fellow Freud that he said not only selfish, but very, very unfortunately selfish, and it pulls you in certain directions, and so on and so on. And that's it. You can't really help the mensch. You can just guide him to maybe be a little bit better, and maybe to organize things, although on a social basis and on other moral ethics bases and so on and so on. Comes along the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe says, no, a mensch is made up of 2 neshamas. In other words, whether you want it or not, you are a duality. You're a duality. You're made up of two forces. And the first one you're made up from is a nefesh, which is from the clip of a Sitra Ashram. We're soon going to see about that. And that's the nefesh HaBahamiyah. And that you have from the moment you're born. The moment you come out of the womb, boom, that's what you got. And then you have another soul, which we'll do in the coming chapter, a divine soul, which is put into you only at a certain point after you've grown up a bit. It begins from the moment of the bris, as brought in Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe said, but until you become bar mitzvah, until you become Yud Gimel Shana v'Yom Achas, the neshama, the second neshama doesn't really enter you fully. It's sort of hovering in you. It's having, a transcendent effect, but it only has a pneumistic and direct effect after you've become a certain age, and then it enters you, and then it even goes through further stages of further development and further entry into your life, and that's the second, or the divine soul. So, what happens in between these two neshamas, as we're going to be told in the coming chapters, there's a war, and that's what's meant to be. You're not meant to be dormant with these two neshamas. You're given the divine neshama in order to reach your ultimate purpose in the creation that Hashem created you, and to bring about the ultimate purpose of the world. And in order to do that, you've got to fight with the other neshama, and you've got to somehow or another bring him to a state of, first of all, bringing him to very severe discipline, or completely driving him out for the time being, and then eventually bringing him also into the service of Hashem, and that leads to a whole new perfection. So the question then would be asked by the intelligent reader, that if it's a duality, that this one's fighting that, then who, as it were, guides the war? Who makes the decision as to who is fighting, is succeeding against who? In other words, there has to be like a referee in the middle, a judge, that he makes the decision. Now the truth of the matter is that that's right, and according to Chassidus, there's really three neshamas. Really three neshamas, and there's in the middle what's called the nefesh ha-sichlis. You have in the middle, between the two, you have what's called human reasoning, ordinary human reasoning. Everyday Balabati's human reasoning, that's called nefesh ha-sichlis, and that's where the koach ha-bechira is placed on the part of the Eibishter. The interesting is the Alter Rebbe doesn't almost mention it here. In Likutei Torah he does, Likutei Torah brings about it. But here he almost doesn't mention, he just hints at it very distantly. I'll show you, basically, when we get that far, about the referee soul in the middle. Basically, and be'ikah, you are two opposing, warring forces. In other words, that according to the Alter Rebbe's psychological setup, you are not a restful being, and you are a duality, and the purpose is to fight a war, and to, it's like one of the Arab kings, Yitzhak Shemoy, said that he only goes to a war if he knows he's going to win it, otherwise he doesn't go to war. So the whole reason that you're sent to this war is that you've got to win it. And you have to know right from the beginning that that's why the war is there, that you have to be. And who is you? Well, that's the question. Who is that you? Who is the you that's going to be successful? Because the divine soul, he knows only divine. The animal soul knows only the animal. So who's the you? So the you is really the third one. There's really a third neshama, or third nefesh, which we're not going to go into right now. But the main thing, the main thing that happens in life on a daily basis is two: the good or divine soul and the animal soul, and they're at war. They're supposed to be at war, and there's got to be a realization on the part of the mensch, which is the third neshama, that he's got this war, and he has got to make sure that the nefesh elokis is given the ruling say in the body, the divine soul. Is going to be given the ruling sign in the body, but the starting point is with the animal soul. The animal soul is the one that makes the start. Why? Because as soon as you're born, you get a certain soul in the body, and that is the animal soul. For reasons known to Hashem, He put that in first. And He gives it 13 years of messing around with you. And it pushes you around and drags you around and dictates to you for 13 full years. Then all of a sudden you get the full revelation of this other soul, and then you've got to start the war going. Up to now, the Nefesh HaBamis has had a, what you might call, a rather comfortable start. He's got a very big start in the war, and he's already got a lot of status quo worked out. He's got you accustomed to all sorts of physical and bodily facts and so on. All of a sudden, these undergo a very severe critical examination on the part of the new revelation of the divine soul. So, now this has very big, this affects and blows somewhat to smithereens a lot of these theories that were mentioned before about the makeup, particularly the psychological makeup of a mensch, and particularly Freudian and other ideas are completely exploded by this idea that really a mensch is a duality. He's got two inyanim in him, even three to be more exact, and he has the whoever he is, has this tremendous, the Nefesh HaSiklid has got this tremendous, responsibility to make sure that this struggle eventually be victorious in the hands of the second Mishon. So that's just a brief glance, brought down right at the beginning, that's the function and the basis of how we're going to explain this whole difference with Tzaddik and Beinoni, and the whole thing is all going to, first of all, says the Alter Rebbe, you need to know that. And look at the way he writes about it. He said that the whole Ish Yisrael, he doesn't just say the Kol Echad Yisrael, he said Kol Ish Yisrael. Yeah, now the word Ish is an interesting word, because according to Chassidus, the word Ish is indicatory of how you can be a controller of yourself. Ish is a strong word. In other words, we refer to a man sometimes as Odom. Odom is a very elevated name. Ish is a slightly less elevated, but it still indicates a strength and a power to rule yourself. And then sometimes we call a mensch Gever, we call him a strong person, but also it means less strong. And then sometimes he's called Enosh, a human being, and that's an even less a praiseworthy term for him. So Ish, we see that everybody is at least expected to be a Ish Yisrael. He's supposed to be a Ish, and he's supposed to have in himself the Madrega of Yisrael, which is a high Madrega as well. No, there are two names for a Jew, Yaakov and Yisrael. And Yaakov is only the beginning name, or the lower name. Yisrael is the higher, more elevated, very elevated name. So the Alter Rebbe said, L'chol Ish Yisrael. Even Yidden, how they're meant to be and how they're supposed to be, on a very high level. He's a Ish, he's a mensch that he really is trying to gain self-control, and he's working at himself. He said, doesn't matter who you are, Echod Tzaddik ve'Echod Rasha. He said, either a Tzaddik or a Rasha. So he could have said Bein Tzaddik or Bein Rasha, you know. Why does it say Echod? So there's an old saying in the Haggadah. We also meet in the Haggadah Shel Pesach. Yeah, we meet that sort of expression. We say Keneged Arba Bonim Divra Torah. There's four sons that the Torah spoke about. Echod Chacham, Echod Rasha, Echod Sheini Yodeh Elisha, Echod Tam. I'm sorry. Ve'Echod Sheini Yodeh Lishoel. So the Friedrich Rebbe taught that why is it written Echod, the word Echod? Just say the four sons, Rasha, Tzaddik, Chacham, Rasha, Enid, Elisha. Why do you have to say Echod, Echod? Because every Jew, no matter who he is, has got the Echod in him. In other words, everybody's got in him Hashem Echad, hidden somewhere in a Yid, and therefore every Yid is referable to the word, by the word, as Echod. And therefore, the Haggadah wants to tell us these are all sons of the Jewish people, and they're all sitting around the table, and they've all come to celebrate Mitzrayim. Some of them are not so good. All right, some of them are a little bit off the line. But the Echad, the Jewish people, they were Echad. The same here. Echad Tzaddik ve'Echad Rosh. The Tzaddik is for sure Aish Echad. He's got the word Echad in him perfection. Even a Rosh has got it. In other words, don't write him off. If he's a Rosh, then our aim is to make something out of him, not to leave him the way he is. Like we saw, if he does tshuva, then he's always Rosh. So that's going to be our whole function in Tanya, not to let him stay a Rosh. So therefore he says, Echad Tzaddik ve'Echad Rosh, yesh shtei neshamot. That every Yid, no matter who he is, from both ends of the rainbow and the greatest extremity, he's got two neshamot in him. Like we just said, deceive, as it is written, Yeshaya Novi said, "V'neshamas aniyah." Oh, it's easy after he said, I'm never going to quarrel with a person all the time, because his spirit went out from me, and all it's got to do is come back to me. That's what he said. Ki neshamas ani asisi. So a lot of people say, as we said, that that's a rather strange way to be mafarish the pasuk. That's where the Alter Rebbe did it. Shehein shtei nefashim. That these two neshamas are two nefeshes. Nefesh achas. One nefesh mitzad klipa v'sitra achra. One nefesh is from the side of mitzad haklipa, the skinlet, the outer skinlet, v'sitra achra, and the other side, which are two names for not such praiseworthy things in the creation. Two names for what you might call evil in a general way. Two names for evil. So I'll speak in a minute. Why do we have to give it two names? Why do we call both Klippa and Sitra Achra? We'll soon see. Vehi amishlabeshes badam ha'odam. And this particular nefesh, which is mitzad the Klippa, where's her place? She encloses herself mitlabeshes. She enters into and encloses herself in the blood of a mensch. That's where your nefesh achas mitzad the Klippa. Sitra, where is it? It's in your blood. How do they say in Yiddish? The Bluten kochen da. The blood is burning. It's koching, how do you say, boiling inside a bench. But that's a sign that, he's running after the world a little too heavily. For what? We'll soon see in a second that I was being exact when I said that. Bedam ha'adam lahachiyah haguf, to cause the guf its life, its general life. In other words, that the Eibusha made it, that this particular nefesh is in the dam, because what carries out your general, if chas v'sholom, anything's wrong with the dam circulation inside the body, you've had it. You understand? The binding together of all the health of the whole body is the dam, and the governing factor over the body is the dam. And therefore, there's one nefesh where he's a bodily nefesh. His nefesh is to look after the physical welfare and being and continuation of the body, and therefore he's in the dam. What the dam's in is to keep the body going, and therefore he's inside the dam. That's where he is, and that's his, as it were, tent. That's his dwelling place inside the dam. So, why would we imagine that, first of all, the Alter brings down that each person's got two neshamas, and then he said that these two neshamas are two nefashim. Now, the word nefesh and neshama are two different words. I mean, they mean basically the same thing, but why does the Alter have to touch? He said every person's got two neshamas, and then he says, shahin, shtei, nefashim. Anybody got any idea? Huh?
The nefesh vitalizes the guf. The neshama is nefesh elokis.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad. In other words, if we examine the works of the Arizal and also the Chassidus and Kabbalah, they teach us that you've got four or maybe even 5 levels of the soul. And they are called Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chayo, Yechida. Have you ever heard of these levels? Nefesh is the more simple level. It's got to do with the body once again. It's shy to the more physical aspect of the mensch. Ruach is his midas. Neshama is his moyach, like you pointed out quite correctly. Neshama has got to do with the moyachim and all the spiritual life that comes from our brain usage. And then Chayo and Yechida are what we call makifim. They're all enveloping aspects of our neshama, which surround the whole of the body and the whole being of the mensch at one go. And in that group are 2 levels, Chaya and Yechid. So now, if I'm going to say that Neshamas Ani Osisi in Yeshaya Novi means Neshama, then he's talking about a high madrega. He's saying Neshama, I'm Neshamas Ani Osisi. You're talking about the 3rd level within the 5 levels, and that's quite a madrega. And that means that everybody would be holding by 2 levels of neshama. Now that's quite an achievement. It's written that few people reach really the madrega of neshama. Otherwise we should reach ruach. Here we hold by nefesh. Otherwise we should get up to nefesh, from nefesh into ruach, and we should get up into neshama. And therefore immediately the Alter Rebbe cancels out for you that you shouldn't think that when Tanya-Ch.1 said Neshamas Ani Osisi, he was referring to the specific level of Neshama HaMavua B'Sfarim. No, he's using the word Neshama in a general way. He just says that each Yid has got in himself 2 spiritual entities, and therefore he says Shahein Nefashis. If we take every Yid, then he starts off with 2 basic Nefashis on a simple level. On the level of nefesh, we take the 5 levels, and that's how you are when you begin. Also, and your nefesh Abamish never goes anything beyond that, because that's what he is. He's a nefesh for sure. Shahin Steiner Foshis. In other words, that the Alter Rebbe corrects you that you shouldn't think that the Yeshaya Novi is talking about the madrega of nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. He just meant in a general way a living life force inside each person, and 2 of them. So therefore the Alter Rebbe said, for our purposes, I'm going to tell you that they're staying nefoshes, because they got to do with simple things like looking after the body, or coming in a high level and teaching you about the divinity and about the Eibishter. But they're not yet on madrega. Don't run away on madregas yet. We're talking in a simple way. Therefore, stay neshama, shahein stay nefoshes. Now he types it out for you, the Alter Rebbe, to warn you that you shouldn't have a mistake. And then he said, Nefesh Achas, one of them is Mitzad, it's from the side of the Klippa and the Sitra Achra. And that is the one that enters the Lavushan, it enters into the garment of the dam of the mensch to keep the guf going. Lahachiyois as a guf. Now, notice that here that it's very interesting that when he refers to what is not good, what might be considered as evil, he uses 2 expressions. He said klipa v'sitracha, and it's very common in throughout Chassidus that when we talk about the clippers, we say klipa v'sitracha. So ask yourself the question: what are these 2 terms? Why do we call the evil, or the possibility of being evil, and the lead-in, what you might call the path that leads you into evil, is klippa v'sitra achra. So we can say like this: a klippa is a fruit has a skin. The word klippa means a skin on a fruit. That's what it means. For example, to peel a fruit is lekalef, or lekalef means to take off the klipa, which is the outer thing on a fruit. Now just imagine if a fruit were to grow on the tree without klippa around it. If it didn't have a klippa, it would just get eaten up by the birds, or it would bang against the tree and it would get damaged in it. The klippa, on the contrary, at the beginning, is a protecting thing. It's got a certain, what you might call, use to it. Later on, when the fruit ripens and undergoes its full development, and you, fortunate human, come along and you want to eat the fruit, then the clipper is no good. You've got to take the clipper off, and you've got to throw him away. Otherwise, you can't get to the fruit. So we see that the clipper started off relatively all right. Then he has a certain protecting activity as he goes along. But when it comes to the ultimate tachlis, the ultimate, how do you call it, the ultimate point of what a fruit's all about, then you've got to get rid of the clipper because it's there for us to eat it. So that would tend to indicate that there's certain things in life, but at the beginning, no, that's not ideal, but that's the way things function. And then gradually that keeps going, and it has a certain protective influence a little bit, and then ultimately what you might call life of an adult human being and a mature person is demands of him that he throw that clipper aside and he get rid of it. So I'll give you an example. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam over there, right near the end, he writes that when a child starts off learning, what do you do for it? You can't say to a child right from the beginning, oh, this is the Abish's will, and you've got to learn purely for Hashem, and I'll away from you, I'm going to beat you to pieces if you're not learning purely for the sake of Hashem. A little kid, what? So what do? You feed him a sweetie, a cookie, to get him to go to Cheder. You tell him it's very Yishmach in the Cheder, and they've got a very beautiful thing, and they'll give you a nice prize, and you'll win a prize, and you'll be the best in the Kitta, or that's gewaldig, But that's the way you get the child to go into the Cheder and to learn, and that's fine, and that's even a good thing. But later on, once he becomes bar mitzvah and he gets a little older, you say, listen, man, you've got to serve the Abishter because of the Abishter, not you. So who's this you? Well, this you is the clipper. This, how do you call this interesting in the world for my own sake? Well, that's what you might call the clipper. So at the beginning, it's okay. At the beginning, it's a necessity almost. And the Rambam writes in Halacha that that's a good way to do it. That's the way you should do it with a young child. You should entice him into Kedusha, which is a good thing for him, according to his feelings and understanding at that point. But later, you've got to teach him to throw it away. Remember, it's like that in every aspect of life, and every aspect of Avodas Hashem. When you're just getting into that matter, then you can have a little bit of self justification, a little bit of your own self and your own thing involved, and you're after something. But at a certain point, that becomes no longer the way, and therefore you got to throw it off. And if you don't throw it off, then it's klipper in the way the Alter Rebbe means. If you don't throw it, it's clipper, and it'll get in the way. And that's what he means here. In other words, it gets in the way. And then it's not good, then you got to throw it off. Now, what is the Indian of Sitra Achra? What's the idea of Sitra Achra? Sitra Achra means literally the other side. The other side. So I'm going to tell you now a little story that years and years ago, when I lived in Australia, I was still a little bit relatively new to a lot of, the anhogas by the Chassidim and by everything and the ways of doing things. All of a sudden, a certain great person, just in case this shouldn't get too personal, this is going on the record, I won't mention his name, but he said he's got to go out collecting that particular night. He's got to collect money for certain matters in reference to the yeshiva, and it's not nice to go on your own, but if you have somebody with you, then you go and you collect. So maybe I'll come up with give away a few of my precious hours and come with him for the collector. I said, for sure, of course. I was prepared to give away my time, and so I went with him. And we come into a yid, and he was a very well-to-do person. And so this gentleman asked him for a donation. He said, look, we need money, and we want you to give a donation. So the guy said, listen here. He said, why should I give you? And he said, I got money, but I worked hard for that. That's my money, you know. Remember, I worked very hard for it. Well, what are you coming asking for my money? You didn't work for it. I worked very hard and struggled and sweated and toiled. It's my money. So the person I was with, he said, you know what the trouble with you is? He said, you're going on the wrong side of the street. You're going on the wrong side of the street. And he said, that's what's called in Hasidus, Sitra Achra, the other side. So he said, what does it mean? When you step out, I remember in the old days when we were kids, the street had two sides. There was what we called the sunny side of the street, and there was what's called the shady side of it. I don't know if you guys in America, but in Australia it was very noticeable. There was, you know, so when we were kids, we always wanted to go on the sunny side of the street. You know, the shady side, you know, it didn't look so good, and it didn't seem to be right. The sunny side of the street, particularly in South Australia, can be quite cold most of the year, or one part of the year it's quite cold. So the sunny side of the street is enticing, it's nice. So the sunny side of the street is what you might call the good and the well-leading side of the street. The other side, you know, it doesn't sort of, it leads you into, you know, that's the way we used to think. The other side of the street is not good. So he said that's exactly what it really is. That there's one side which is the sunny side of the street, the good side, and then there's another side of the street which leads you down the drain, to use the expression. So he said, what is the right side of the street? The right sunny side of the street is what's money? Money was created by Hashem, and it was given by Hashem to me that I should use it for His purposes, and I should know it's not really my money. You know, I had to work hard for it, because Hashem wanted that by working we should be mavara of the world. We should bring out all the netzutzas, kedusha, and everything. We have to work, and then we get the money. The money belongs to Hashem, not to us. It's not our money. It belongs to Hashem. We've got to see it go back to Him in the right way. Go back for His purposes, for charity. Got to give back. The other side of the street, where you're going down the drain, that says exactly the opposite. No, since I worked hard for it, then it's mine. You know, it went into my pocket, so it belongs to me. Well, that's the other side. It appears to be right. It appears to have a justification. The man said, I worked hard, it's my money. But it's the other side of the street. It's not the right side, and it's leading you down the drain. In other words, it's leading you into the whole basic breaking down of real emissary relations between men and supporting proper institutions which Hashem wants, and that's how He wants. And somebody who's needy, and if we can help them, then we have to do it, because that's what Hashem wants us to do. So I was quite, you know, young at that time. I remember that explanation made a very deep impression on me. I thought that was very remarkable. In the end, he gave us a check for $250. Well, in those days, 250 Australian dollars was worth money. It would, what nowadays would be at least 500 American nowadays. And he didn't throw us out. Yeah? He didn't make us rich, but he gave us, he gave something which for him, I'm sure, was unusual. That he was, because he heard that he's got to get out. He's got to get out to the other side of the street. He's on the Sitra Achara. He's on the wrong side. You know, he's on the other side, and that's what the Alter Rebbe will say later on in Perek Vav. The Alter Rebbe will say Sitra Achara means that's not the side of kedusha. It's the other side from kedusha. It's not the right side of the street. And Klippa is the way I just explained to you. So the Alter Rebbe said, you've got a nefesh inside you, but that nefesh, he is enthusiastic about those two things, and he thinks they're the ultimate purpose, and therefore he teaches you the whole time. He's all the time draining you up with Klippa. Look, it's good, it's fine. Don't listen to these other people, they'll tell you it's only you go for it, and just stay on the other side of it. It's yours. Put it in your pocket, and be happy and be rich. Make a happy life and a good life. Stay on the other side of the street. All of a sudden it comes along, the other nefesh, after you give Moshana or Yom Echad, it comes along and says, wait a minute, man, go over the other side. Get across the street to the right side. Thank you, my gentlemen. So remember, And whenever you think about yourself, you say, oh, it's really all mine and it all belongs to me, then you're on the wrong side of this.
Clear enough. Yeah.